We did get an official schedule released for the Colorado Buffaloes, and obviously we've known who the opponents were going to be for quite some time. But now we know the order in which these games are going to be played. And, well, before we go game by game here and kind of give some opinion, what do you make of how the schedule kind of shook out, the opponent's strength of schedule, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think, as you had said, we had known what teams we were going to be playing at home, which teams we were going to be playing on the road. We just didn't really know the order, but I do like the order. I don't think it's that big of a deal, but I always like to take a look at when the bye weeks are. Are they traveling after a bye week? Mm-hmm. Have they been traveling and then get to have a bye week? Like they go to Orlando and then they have a bye week after that. So you don't have that long travel day back from the East Coast and then have to get ready for a game.
Right.
Which I think is great.
I don't have last year's schedule pulled up in front of me, but it seemed like it was kind of heavy. Like it was like multiple away games in a row, multiple home games in a row. Like this schedule so far seems pretty balanced of like home, away, home, away.
So this has a little bit more balance, which is good. I like the placement of the bye weeks. I like that there's not many Friday games. The only time they have a Friday game is the last game of the season, and that'll be on Black Friday. Last regular season game of the season. I'm going to correct myself there because they're going to have a Big 12 championship to play and maybe a college football playoff game to play.
Against one of the best, better teams in the Big 12, competitive teams, I should say, in Oklahoma State. They've always been a solid program in recent memory.
Yeah, that's right. And I think they will be one of the top programs still, as long as they have Mike Gundy.
Yeah.
He's a good football coach.
So let's go from start to finish here. They open up the season August 31st against a home game against North Dakota State. So they open up at home this year. Remember last year they were on the road at TCU. And that's what really, I think, started the whole belief, right? Because TCU at that point was in the national championship game the year prior. And I know that there was a lot of turnover with their roster, but CU goes into TCU opening game of the season with a big upset victory. Were they 14-point dogs for that game? They were big dogs.
21. 21.
Hindsight's always 20/20, but man.
I think we've already seen an early line for this North Dakota State game, and I believe it was around 9, I want to say 8 or 9. FanDuel had posted an early line against North Dakota State. Not a team that you would ever look past. North Dakota State has pulled off plenty of upsets against Power 5 teams early on in the season.
Home of Trey Lance, Carson Wentz, right?
The best FCS team, and has been like that for a while. At best FCS program, I don't think they've won a national championship within the last 2 years. Maybe 2 years ago they did it.
But they're always in and around the game.
Correct. They're always in the mix. They lost their head coach this year. I think they lost their offensive coordinator too, so they have a few guys to replace there. But that's a program that's always going to get talent. They're always going to get the top FCS level talent. They have enough talent to compete with G5 programs, to compete with Power 5 programs. So it's not a game that anybody's going to be looking past. But obviously they're going to have to win that one.
And then much like the 2023 schedule, consecutive games against Nebraska and Colorado State, except this time, both of those games will be on the road. At Nebraska on September 7th, at Colorado State in Fort Collins on September the 14th.
So a little bit of a bone to pick with Rick George. It's like if you're going to schedule, and this probably happened, 6 to 8 years ago when these games got scheduled. But if you're going to schedule Nebraska and CSU in the same season, why would you not do home and away each year? I don't know if he was thinking about that, but I would have rather done home and away last year, home and away this year. Now you got to go on the road against two rivals back-to-back weeks. I don't think that's going to be easy at all, and I think it would be good to be 1-1 through those two games. Now, there are two teams that CU probably has more talent than Nebraska, maybe closer, obviously, than CSU, but I think if you go 1-1 through that stretch, it's actually pretty good.
And Nebraska should be better. And obviously, I forget his name, but the quarterback who played against CU last year for Nebraska, no disrespect,
Jeff
man.
Sims.
That was foul. I have a buddy who's a Nebraska alum and big Nebraska fan, and even he was texting me during the game, I don't know what I'm watching right now. So you would expect outside of the quarterback position, but Matt Rule, a full year under his belt. Matt Rule, one of the more respected coaches in college football in recent memory. You would think Nebraska's going to be better. And obviously, anytime you got a rivalry game, Colorado State, you got to give credit where credit is due. Tough game last year. A lot of trash talk back and forth leading up to it, but that was an overtime victory for the Buffs, not exactly a cakewalk. So two, I think, intriguing competitive matchups to open up the season on top of North Dakota State.
I think what will be beneficial against Nebraska is you're going up against what will likely be a true freshman quarterback in Dylan Raiola. This will be his first
highly touted.
Highly touted. And this will be his first tough game. They open with UTEP and then they got Colorado the next week. So UTEP will probably walk right over. That won't be tough. Dylan Raiola has to play a really big game, his second game of his college career, which will be interesting.
Yeah, and then after that Colorado State game, they take on Baylor September 21st. Then they're at UCF. That should be a fun one on Saturday, September 28th. That rounds out the September portion of the schedule. What do you think about Baylor and UCF?
Baylor, solid program. They had a tough year last year, so we'll see if they're able to kind of right the ship there. Not a team that I would be too worried about at home. Central Florida, I think, is an awesome team to get to play. Colorado has obviously focused on recruiting Florida. Coach Prime loves his Florida boys. And so to be able to go to Florida to prove that you're going to be able to play in front of some of your family while you're at Colorado, I think is a really big deal. I know a lot of the Florida boys, Jimmy Horn was talking about it on a video today, or video this week, that he's excited for that game. He's got that one circled because he's going back to the crib and all of his family is going to be there. And I think you're going to have a lot of Florida boys that seem to really want to play for Coach Prime. They're going to see that you get to go play in Orlando, which is great.
That's a great point. I know Prime resides in Texas these days, but he's also a Florida boy himself, at heart. So, a little bit of a homecoming there. That should be a fun one against UCF. And then looking forward here to October, 3 games in that month, October 12th versus Kansas State, another, interesting program over the last handful of years. October 19th at Arizona, and then October 26th at Cincinnati, or versus Cincinnati, a team that, not so long ago was also in the college football playoff.
Kansas State homecoming game, that will be a lot of fun. That'll be a close game. They got a great young quarterback there in Manhattan, so I think that will be a very good game. Arizona is probably the toughest game on the schedule. I think it helps, obviously, that Jed Fish went to Washington. They have to replace the head coach and a lot of the coaching staff there at Arizona, but they still got talent. Noah Fafita is still at Arizona, and he might be one of the best quarterbacks in the nation.
Good point.
That's going to be probably the toughest game on the schedule to go into Tucson.
You think that's the toughest game?
I think that, yes, I do.
It's going to be tough.
We'll see what that team ends up looking like, but as long as Fafita is there, I would be worried about going to Tucson. It shouldn't be too hot. I would imagine that'll probably be a night game in Tucson, but it's still Arizona in October. It's pretty warm.
Yeah, it is very warm there. So that'll be a fun one. And then to round us out here, the November portion of the schedule, November 9th at Texas Tech. November 16th versus Utah, so familiar foe there, and obviously, another one of those programs that's been pretty solid over the last half decade or so. And then November 23rd at Kansas, and we talked about Oklahoma State to round out the year at home on the 29th.
Texas Tech, always a really tough place to play. They always pull off an upset in Lubbock against a much better team, so I would definitely be worried about that game. Utah, I think, will be a lot of fun. I think that might be an opportunity to beat Utah. Been a while since the Buffs have beaten Utah.
Yes, it has.
So I think that would be great if they're able to pull that one off. And then Kansas might be the game I'm most excited about. Kansas is a great program. That game is going to be at Arrowhead Stadium, also known as Taylor Swift Field. I think that'll be fun. I think I might try to make a trip out to Kansas City for that
100%.
Ooh, is the whole crew going to go to Kansas City?
I was about to say, I mean, as long as we're all willing and able, we are all for sure going to Nebraska.
Yes.
To open up the season.
Little road trip with the boys.
That's going to happen. And then the next week against Colorado State, that is also a lock. Maybe we got to, get some loyal listeners of the Sko Show. Maybe we do a little group caravan.
Yes.
Pack in 3 or 4 cars, whatever. And
I don't know if I can ride in a car with Angry Andy for that long.
Yeah, the talent can be in there. I'm just joking.
Okay.
No, we can have our own little setup. But no, for real, we should try to get a little caravan up there going. Maybe try to find a bar up in Fort Collins, a bar out in Nebraska, maybe do some shows, some content.
I love it. I love
Take a little trip to Orlando.
I mean, I'm down for Orlando.
Yes.
Always down.
That's the hardest one to pull off, but the weather, the beach.
Yeah.
Ish.
And then you bring it up at Kansas on November the 23rd. That's another, get your kicks in early in the year.
Well, Kansas City's easy to fly into. That's not a game that I would need a road trip for.
That's a good point. That is easy to drive into or fly into.
We take that short flight, eat some barbecue, some fantastic barbecue.
I've never had authentic. I've never had barbecue in Kansas City. So
wow,
that's a top bucket list item for me.
We're gonna have to talk to Adam about that because he was already hyping up. I believe Joe's is a spot in Kansas City that he's excited.